There's a question that comes up quite often around this trauma healing journey, and that is, can we heal on our own? And if you followed me for any length of time, you likely know what my answer to that is. Unfortunately, no, we can't. I wish that we could, because it would make things so much easier, but we can't. And today I want to talk about why that is, because the why is actually part of the healing process. Welcome, I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thanks so much for joining me. So, you've probably heard me say it in many ways at different times, but healing happens in connection. I say that all the time because it is so true. The deep core healing that we deserve to experience and experience on this journey, the thing that leads us to being on the other side or at the top of that summit, is the connection that we allow ourselves to experience along the way. Connection to ourselves, connection to others. Because for childhood trauma survivors, and I want to be clear that for this video, I am talking really specifically about interpersonal childhood trauma. So not trauma that a child experiences like a natural disaster or a car accident, or even really like the loss of somebody that they love, a parent even. While those can all be traumatic and have long-lasting impact, most of the people that are watching my videos and most of the people that I communicate with, people in our community, are people that have experienced childhood trauma at the hands of another person, so interpersonal trauma. When we are hurt by somebody, and for many of us, that is somebody that we know, often somebody that we trust, and often somebody that we love. So when we experience trauma perpetrated by somebody that holds that space in our lives, that wounding is actually what creates so much of the kind of damage, so to speak, as we go on in life. So because that trauma and that wounding is created in the context of a relationship, a person that you should be able to trust. And I also want to say that as children, you should be able to trust everybody. Whether it's a stranger, whether it's somebody in, a parent's friend, somebody in your family, a friend's parent, no matter who it is, you should be able to trust everybody as a child. So when you're saying to yourself, well, it wasn't a parent that abused me, any adult you should have been able to trust. So when that trust is broken, that creates a very deep wound, and it really does affect pretty much everything in our lives to varying degrees potentially. But that trauma happens, that wounding happens in the context of some sort of relationship. And therefore, the only way that we can heal that is within the context of a healing relationship. Now, a lot of people will say, well, I'm in a relationship and my boyfriend or my girlfriend is great. Well, that can be a healing relationship for you potentially, but that is not going to be enough for your overall healing. In part because, as you've heard me say before, the impact of trauma is multi-layered, right? So there's a lot of different pieces in terms of the impact that we experience. Therefore, there are a whole lot of layers to the healing process. And while having a relationship with somebody, even a friend, there can be a lot of healing that you can experience in that, but to really kind of undo everything that trauma made you believe about who you are, it requires a little bit more intentional and skilled effort, expertise, attention Because everybody, and this is certainly true for therapists as well, but hopefully they've got enough training, they've got enough supervision, they continue to have at least some peer supervision. Everybody's got their own stuff. And in the context of a relationship, so whether it's a friendship or a partnership, in the context of a relationship, we all bring our own stuff into that relationship. Most people aren't aware of what their stuff is. And so both sides can show up in ways that are not necessarily the healthiest and can easily be kind of triggered in a sense when one person is doing or saying something, or even not doing something, or not saying something, right? So when that then happens, it can kind of undo some of the other pieces that have been good. It doesn't mean the relationship is bad necessarily at all, but in terms of it being helpful in your overall healing journey, it just can create some complications which is why it isn't enough for this healing journey, for the relationship that helps you heal. So we heal in the context of relationships, and within those, the connection that happens when we allow ourselves to be seen and heard, when we recognize that this person can know things about us and not run away, not judge us, still want to help us, still care, still believe in you, right? Because there's a good chance you're likely not going to feel comfortable sharing certain things with a friend or a partner that hopefully you would feel more comfortable, at least with a little bit of time, that you might share with a therapist. A therapist is often the only person that knows some things about their clients. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the purpose of having a therapist. So we need that relationship in order to be able to heal. And why is that? So I've talked about this in different ways at different times. But within that relationship, when we can allow ourselves to be seen, when we can experience the nature of a healthy relationship, where we can have difficult conversations, where emotions can be expressed and felt, when the parts of ourselves that we've tried so desperately to hide, sometimes even from ourselves, can come out of the shadows and be seen. There's so much healing that happens in that. And I have an example that I want to share with you to help you maybe apply this in a little bit of a different way. So if you think about an animal, let's think of a dog specifically, that has been abused. That dog is naturally going to be fearful of people, right? Sound familiar? Maybe in different ways, but the dog is fearful, right? Like it doesn't want to approach you. It's very timid, or maybe very aggressive even, right? And this can also apply to people. But the dog isn't going to be trusting of people. It's going to take time, right? And ideally, the person that is going to try to help that dog feel safe again kind of knows a little bit about what they're doing. They understand why the dog is reacting that way. And this is something that happens quite often. Like somebody will adopt a dog from a shelter, and that dog has some issues because they've been out on their own and had to, try to fight for food and be out there all by themselves, and maybe they were abused. And so there's all this stuff going on. And somebody might adopt that dog, not really understanding why the dog is behaving in the way that it is. And they get frustrated, right? It brings up kind of their own stuff, their disappointment in the dog. Maybe they're beating themselves up because they should be able to do better. Could be any number of things. But then they end up really frustrated with the dog and either aren't so kind to the dog or maybe rehome the dog because they don't really understand what's going on. Well, the same is kind of true like what I was just talking about with a relationship. But if you have somebody that understands why a dog would respond the way that it does, if somebody understands the impact on that dog from being in whatever situation it was, maybe it was it was left outside all the time. Maybe it's been in a shelter its entire life. Maybe it was used for dog fighting. Like, there could be any number of things. But if there's somebody who understands why the dog is responding in the way that it is, maybe one moment cowering and maybe in another moment becoming really aggressive, instead of just reacting to the dog, when you can approach it from a place of understanding and have the skills necessary for helping that dog learn to feel safe, that's going to work much better, right? And so if you've got this dog as its new owner, when the dog is not wanting to come to you, not wanting you to be all excited and pet it, you will approach that from a place of understanding. You will go at it relatively slowly. You will be mindful of not letting your own frustrations get in the way. But how does that dog eventually learn to trust, to feel safe, to feel that sense of freedom and ease, to just go about their day and to come up to you any old time, to not immediately want to run away every time you call their name? How does that happen? It happens by repeated exposure, repeated practicing over time, right? Like the first time you put your hand out there, the dog might run away. You keep doing it. You keep putting your hand out there. Maybe the dog doesn't come for quite some time, but eventually you put your hand out there and the dog will sniff it. And then as soon as you try to put your hand up to pet the dog might run away. But the more time the dog gets to just sniff your hand, the safer the dog feels. And eventually you can pet the dog. And eventually, with enough experience, enough practice with that human or humans, the safer that dog begins to feel. And eventually doesn't cower, doesn't growl at the first sight of somebody coming near them. We are the same in so many ways. Could a dog ever learn to feel safe around people if it did it on its own? Now, I know you might be saying, well, dogs are different than people and we can't compare the two. Well, we can in a sense, because the mechanism that's happening internally is about survival. And whether you're a dog or a human, our survival instincts are very similar, because survival instincts aren't based on thought. They're not based on thinking processes. They're instinctual. And just like we, as humans, when we have been hurt by somebody, we naturally fear trusting. We fear potential hurt, whether it's conscious or not. Just like the dog isn't thinking, oh, is this the person that's going to hurt me? Maybe this person won't hurt me. The dog isn't thinking, right? The dog is just responding to what's happening internally. But with a skilled person helping that dog learn to feel safe, the dog eventually does. Because it has practice over time. It gets to experience that it can be safe to be near another person, that not all people are the same. And over time, the dog's survival instinct, their fear response, reduces. And that's where that sense of freedom comes from. So I know the inclination, probably for most people, is to want to do the healing on their own because it feels safer and easier. And I completely understand that. I felt similarly. And there's a survival aspect of that. But just like the dog, who could never learn to trust somebody if there wasn't somebody willing to do that, who understood what was happening, we can't either. And this is also part of the reason that it takes the time that it does, because we are thinking beings, and our thoughts create so much havoc for us in our lives, because those thoughts are based on what we believe about who we are and the world around us, that it's not safe, that people are not safe. So our thought process gets in the way. So while I'm using the reference of a dog that's been abused, in many ways, it's actually much easier with a dog because they just need to experience it. They don't have the thought process happening. They're not questioning themselves. Unlike us as humans that question everything, that doubt that hand, that doubt the energy even that we get to feel from other people. We make excuses for it. We rationalize it. And that does get in the way. That is our thought process. And that's why we need that repeated so-called exposure over time to build that sense of being okay and safe. To feel safe when we are seen, particularly with the things that we have tried so desperately to hide, that we've been afraid of people knowing about us, the things that we have feared them judging about who we are, to allow ourselves to be seen and accepted by another person. That is how we get to recognize and trust that we are not only okay and enough, but worthy and deserving. And just like a dog, once they feel that sense of safety, they're no longer feeling any fear when your hand is reached out. They no longer fear trying new things, playing with new toys. If you yell for them, they don't immediately run away because they're afraid of being hurt, because they've had the experience to show them that it is now safe. And so I want to be clear that other relationships that we have in our lives can be and are an important part of actually our healing process. But there are too many layers, too many nuanced aspects that go into every individual relationship, that those relationships on their own are not enough for us to be able to really do the deep healing work. So unfortunately, we cannot heal on our own. And I hope that how I've described this maybe helps you see it a little bit differently, thinking about an animal. Because, even if I were talking about another person, it's very easy to separate yourself from that person, seeing how you're so different in so many ways. But if you can look at it in the context of an animal even that you would believe is innocent and didn't deserve to be abused, and the struggle that they can have in trusting, I think it maybe can be a little bit easier to see how you, also as an animal, right? We are human beings that have a survival instinct. We are human beings that are sometimes hurt deeply by another person, and the impact that that has on us. And this is why the healing process takes the time and the practice that it does. So be gentle with yourself as you think about a dog that's been abused and thinking about the compassion that you would have for that dog that, of course, is scared of people, of course, doesn't trust that they won't be hurt. A dog that has not had food for days or not consistently had food for a while. It makes sense that when their food is placed in front of them, that they're going to eat it like that. You have compassion for that. You deserve that compassion too. You're not failing in this process. You deserve to have support. You deserve to be seen and heard. You deserve patience from others, and maybe most importantly, from yourself as you move through this healing journey. I'd love to hear from you about just what you noticed coming up for you. Does it make any sort of difference thinking about it in the perspective that I shared today? Are you able to maybe see that part of yourself, that fearful part of yourself, in a similar way? To meet her or him with compassion? You deserve that. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, click the bell for notifications. And if you found this helpful, or maybe think somebody else might find it helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up so other people can find it too. Thanks so much for watching. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.